honored to be back here again and chair this event. I've actually lost count of how many times I've done it. Maybe I don't want to count. Maybe I'm better off not counting. So that excerpt that you just heard is from the podcast, the Father Michael Kelly podcast, episode 1, which can be accessed online, and it's always great to just start the event with the voice of the man himself. But before we begin, a few points to be aware of. The event is being live streamed to the Irish Global Health Network YouTube channel. So welcome to everyone watching online, particularly friends joining us from Africa this evening, and particularly pleased to welcome members of the Father Michael's family who are here with us this evening. Where are you? There you are. Can we give them a round of applause? There. It's just so lovely to have you here and represent the great man himself. So a recording of the event will also be available for those of you who like to access it and share it on social media. And speaking of social media, I really encourage you to use the hashtag, which is hashtag FMK22, and of course the hashtag WAD 2022 World AIDS Day hashtag, to try and get what is happening, the conversation that's happening here tonight, across to the people outside, and raise awareness around the valuable insights that we are going to hear from our wonderful keynote speakers and our panelists, of course. Just a little bit of housekeeping in relation to an evaluation form which is on your seats or pews. There's actually the actual pews at the back there. So please take the time to fill those out. And of course, there is also a QR code which we'll put up later, just in case you want to do it online. Okay, so that's really it. If you could obviously put your phones on silence, that would be deeply appreciated, but please feel free to tweet and Insta and Snapchat away as you like. Okay, so moving on to our very first speaker of this evening. It gives me great pleasure indeed to open the event. We are privileged to be joined by Colm Brophy, the Minister of State for Overseas Development, Aid and Diaspora. Please come.
Thank you very much, and it is a great privilege actually to do this in person, because and I'm glad there were people joining us from all over the world, but to have an opportunity as Minister to do this in person, having done it in that COVID environment and world of the screen, the camera, the whatever Zoom meeting type thing that you call it, I think it is far more beneficial and really is so positive that we're able to meet together for this lecture. Just can I say that, you know, it is for me very important that we acknowledge on this day, World AIDS Day, that we have this opportunity, as I say, to come together, to welcome you to the 17th annual Professor Father Michael Kelly Lecture on HIV/AIDS. It's, as has been already said, very special again to have the family here, and the enduring legacy and lifelong commitment to fighting HIV/AIDS that's Father Michael's, and that so many people acknowledging that by coming here this evening. It's a really good crowd, and thank you very much. And I'm very proud that the Department of Foreign Affairs established this annual lecture going all the way back to 2006. It continues to represent our commitment and understanding of all we share by those affected with HIV in the world today. As I say, it's a great privilege to address you in the beautiful theatre that we're in. This venue, as you know, has gone through many transformations since it opened its doors in 1662. 40 years since the first cases, though, of HIV, the world's fight against this deadly disease has been transformed. From the fear of the unknown to the deaths of millions, the world has made great strides in solidarity to tackle it together. We now know more about this disease and how to control it than ever before. More people are on antiretrovirals than ever before. Many more people are living healthy, normal lives as a result. And yet the last few years have been exceptionally difficult for those affected by HIV. Unimaginable hunger in the Horn of Africa, the economic damage of COVID-19, the illegal invasion in Ukraine, the effects of climate change in Pakistan and elsewhere in places like South Sudan. We sit at the dangerous precipice of one crisis being overshadowed by another. 3 months ago, I witnessed firsthand the enormous scale of the hunger crisis in the Horn of Africa while visiting both Kenya and South Sudan. The fight against AIDS and HIV is not only taking place at a time of global crisis, this fight itself is in crisis. At a recent UN AIDS report, progress in prevention and treatment is faltering around the world. It's putting millions of people in grave danger. Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, North Africa, have all seen increases in annual HIV infections over several years. Approximately 1.5 million new HIV infections occurred last year, more than 1 million more than the global targets. Every 2 minutes in 2021, an adolescent girl or young woman was newly infected with HIV. And yet we cannot take our focus off the 2030 target of ending this disease. We cannot lose hope. And I'm confident that we can get back on track. However, it's going to take another transformation. We cannot and must not return to business as usual. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed many inequalities in the global health architecture, and it's imperative that we invest in more sustainable, resilient, and people-centered health systems going forward. It's essential also that we invest in community-led health structures, including frontline community health workers. It's essential that we must reach the most vulnerable, the key populations that continue to face social and legal barriers in many parts of the world. And it is also essential that we be brave and call out inequalities and injustices at every opportunity. In September, world leaders gathered in New York to pledge the 7th replenishment of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. Now, I'm proud to say that Ireland announced a 30% increase in our pledge for that period, which is 2023 to 2025. It's a total of €65 million. Overall, though, it fell short of its target of trying to reach $18 billion. The Global Fund still raised $15.7 billion amidst an incredibly difficult global context. I'm particularly conscious that our first keynote speaker this evening, who I just had an opportunity to meet, Andre here, has travelled all the way from Ukraine to speak here tonight, and he's also a board member of the Global Fund. Andre's organisation's commitment to maintaining critical life-saving services for some of Ukraine's most vulnerable key populations throughout this war is profoundly admirable, and thank you very much for joining us here this evening. Ireland was among the first to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, with An Taoiseach announcing a significant Irish response package on the first day of the invasion that has since increased to over €20 million. Ireland's funding to the Ukraine conflict has also included a strong sexual and reproductive health and rights dimension, where a number of the partners are working to provide psychosocial supports to affected populations. As outlined in A Better World, which is Ireland's international development policy, we remain committed to strengthening our work on sexual and reproductive health and rights, vital not only in HIV prevention, but in the wider gender equality fight. This year, my department doubled our commitment to Frontline AIDS, an important global partnership organisation tackling HIV/AIDS issues. We're increasing our support to the World Health Organization, including to its Emergency Response Fund. Next year, we hope to double our support to comprehensive sexuality education programming, another pivotal tool in our arsenal to prevent new HIV infections. Why do we see these approaches as key? Because in times of crisis, it is most often women and girls that will face the biggest burden. Recently, in the UK, the International Development Committee held a session on hunger in the Horn of Africa. They heard of increased reports of sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls suffering from malnutrition. Father Michael knew of the burden women and girls face. When he talked about tackling deep-rooted gender inequalities, particularly in the case of adolescent girls and young women, he saw only one solution: sustained and comprehensive efforts to reduce those inequalities and eventually eliminate them. So let's not lose focus. Let us learn from the lessons of decades of tackling HIV/AIDS, from the lessons of COVID-19 pandemic, and from the legacy of Father Michael that lives on in countless health workers and activists that are working to end this disease for good. Before I hand back to the excellent moderator, I would like to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to the Irish Global Health Network for their fantastic collaboration for this year's event, and to the incredible speakers we will hear today. It's been a privilege to speak to you on what promises to be yet another wonderful legacy to Father Michael. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Colm Brophy, the Minister of State for Overseas Development Aid and Diaspora. You know, those words actually, I think the words that are going to be ringing in my mind for the rest of the evening. You know, crisis overshadowed by another crisis. I think that's something that we were talking even, you know, how can we keep the topic of HIV and AIDS at the top of that list instead of something else always coming up, because it is, as Robbie pointed out, it's an infectious disease, so it needs to be looked at and it needs to be kept at the top of the list. But thank you very much for the wonderful opening remarks, Minister.